Welcome. Today I want to visit with you a little bit about what's going on nationally as it relates to real estate. And I have a handful of slides that I would like to share with you as we visit and talk about what's going on. Currently, we're continuing to see interest rates fluctuate. There's lots of noise and lots of media noise around the Fed and what the Fed will or will not do in October as it relates to adjusting interest rates. If you remember, we did a video, we talked about the adjustments and the impact that it had in July. We anticipate that they're going to adjust it. We anticipate that they're going to adjust the federal rate up because ultimately they're trying to curb the inflation numbers, which we need them to do so things don't get completely out of hand and you're spending massive amounts of money for a gallon of milk. So while we understand that, it's important that we recognize here's why inflation is being curbed, because we need it to. Here's why we understand mortgage rates are fluctuating. Mortgage rates are tied to the 10-year Treasury bill. So if you ever want to have an indicator leading or lagging of what's happening or what's just happened, you can always look up what the T-bill, the 10-year T-bill is doing, and it will show you whether they're going to go up or down based on how that number is moving around. So let's take a look at this slide on fluctuation of real estate mortgage 30-year interest rates. As we look at the rates, we can see that back in January we were in that 3.2 range, and they've gone up and down as we've gone throughout the year. If we look at the beginning of August, and again these numbers are according to Freddie Mac, you can see that at the bottom of the slide, but if we're looking at what's happened, you can see the trend that they are moving, they're fluctuating. Some months they're up, some months they come down, some months they go back up, some months they come down even a little further. Ultimately, they have increased. We all feel that, we all recognize that. But they are moving. So if we look at where we're at right now, we look at August, and you had a fluctuation down, which was good. And if you look at really the beginning of September, which Freddie Mac's numbers aren't reflected on this slide, we're seeing rates today at the very beginning of September be right around that higher fives, maybe very low sixes, and not sure if they're going to go up or down. It'll all depend on how that T-bill responds to what the market's doing. As we've looked at fluctuation in rates, now let's talk about what else is in the noise that we're all being fed every day of our life. And that's the concept of this looming recession. We've talked about recessions here before. I have my own opinion on a recession. I hope that you've done some research and you have your opinion on what indicators you're watching to determine whether we're in a recession. Not just watching that the mainstream media or the news outlet that you're pulling data from is saying, hey, we're now in a recession, or hey, one is coming. But looking at what is it that really causes that and where is your positioning on that. Let's take a look at this slide and talk about what that means. So if we look at this slide shows a relationship or a survey based on economists predicting or believing that we'll see a recession. And so as we've gone throughout the year, the number has obviously increased. July, saying 50% of economists are saying that we will see a recession or that it's coming around the corner based on the numbers that they have. If we roll to the next slide, we look at the recessions don't mean falling prices as it relates to homes. So the fact that a recession is coming and that 50% of economists say that there's one coming doesn't denote that there needs to be panic and fear around the housing industry. It simply means that it's a recession. So if we look at the recession not being house price fallings, well, what does a recession mean? And that's in this next slide. Looking at this slide, this is data that came from Freddie Mac and mortgage specialists, and they're showing that a recession really means that mortgage rates are going to have to fall. If we look at the last 6 recessions, you're going to see that we go into a recession, rates jump up, typically because it needs to curb something, mostly inflation. So as rates come up, we get to the peak of those recessions with the highest interest rate we're going to have during that recessive period, and then as they start to come down, they typically drop on average about 1.8% from where they were at the peak to the low when we hit the bottom of the trough of the recession. That, to me, shows more predictability than the other one that we're going to have a problem. This shows me that it's going to be tighter, it's going to be slower, we're going to have to make some changes in our consumer habits, and ultimately, interest rates will come down, people will still own homes, you'll still be able to buy, you'll still be able to sell. There's not a reason to have fear and panic, but you need to be looking at who are the experts you're listening to, that you believe and that you resonate with, so that you can have certainty as you move forward in your decision-making process. So in turn, why do I say that we need to have certainty? Because there's currently not enough homes for sale. We've talked about on multiple episodes, we've talked about on all of our updates, saturation and absorption rates. When we look at a national level with the NAR numbers, or we look at the local level, we're trending right about the same number of months of inventory across the board. We currently only have right about 3 months of inventory on the market. That still means it's a seller's market. That still means that there's demand. There's still opportunity. We need to figure out where the equitable solution is and where those two meet, so that the buyer feels like, hey, I'm getting what I want for a price I'm willing to pay, and the seller feels like, I'm selling a home that I don't want anymore for a price I'm willing to take. Where's that middle ground? Yes, we're going to continue to see the deceleration, but ultimately, we don't have enough inventory. Let's take a look at this slide on inventory. So we look at not having enough homes, and we look back to 1999, and we come all the way back to today. Now, the red columns in the center, you'll see that's the period of time where we had the housing crisis, and then we had a lot of inventory. So 10.4 months at the peak in 2008. That's a very strong buyer's market. You're plus 6 months. We're currently right at 3. In 2021, you were at 2.3 as an average. This is, again, NAR's numbers for not having enough homes. So when we look at inventory and we see that we don't have enough homes to meet the current demand, or we don't have enough new homes, or we don't have enough of the right priced homes to meet the current demand of where the buyers are, we wonder, well, does that mean we're going to have more foreclosures? What does that mean? Does that mean we're going to go into a bigger housing problem? I don't believe there's a housing crisis. I think that there is a crisis, and I think that that crisis is that we're creating fear around things that we should be creating certainty around, and we should be creating strategy around. The concept of go get more or make it easier to borrow consumer money and spend that on things that depreciate or that become worthless over time, to me that makes no sense. Doesn't mean you shouldn't use that and leverage it. It just means if that's the strategy, it's not going to take you in the right direction. The strategy is, what are the things that are going to appreciate? How are things going to go up? When we couple that with the current lending standards, and we look at, let's just take the recession, right? The recession. Let's take the housing crisis in 2008, 7 and 8, and let's look at today. The lending standards are very different. Here's a slide that shows you that. In the peak of 07, 08, the housing bubble, you had this 8.68 index on the mortgage credit availability. Well, now you're at 119.6. You have such a drastic difference in lending standards that right now, you can't just go get any mortgage or any loan that you want. You have to be able to qualify for it. And it's been that way since the housing crisis. Going into the housing crisis, we were making loans for anybody who said they wanted one. If you had a social security number and a pulse, you could have any amount of money you wanted. You didn't even have to document it. Well, that standard creates a problem. The standards are too great right now for us to be worried about a crisis. We need to lean into the certainty. I keep using the word certainty because I want you to hear in my voice that there's a lot of opportunity in this current market. There's no reason to be afraid. There is a reason to be strategic and to look at what you want most and how do you get what you want most with the right strategy. Hire the right people to help you who can help you and negotiate and have the conversation to get you to where you want to be. That's the key. Then I get the next question from a lot of people. Well, what about foreclosures? I'm going to wait and then I'm going to buy a foreclosure because that really worked out well for people that I know in 2008, 9, 10, 12, which would have been the peak of when there was the most homes at the most affordable time, we waited. Let me show you some slides. I'm going to show you a couple of them on what's happening right now as it relates to foreclosures. The first one, we look at foreclosure activity by year. When we look back to 2010, you had 2.9 million homes that were in the foreclosure period or were foreclosed. Again, data, source the data, it's coming from Adam Data Solutions. And we look all the way forward to 2021, year to date, 151,000. Now that's a lot of homes that are in the foreclosure process. 150,000 homes in the United States that are in the foreclosure process. That's still a lot of homes, right? We feel for those 151,000 families that are having challenges. When we look at what leads to massive foreclosures or to housing crises, this number is as low as it's going to be or has been in the last 14 years. We don't need to have panic and fear. The lending standards are offsetting that. If the lending standards were the same as they were before, I would say this number is going to reach or exceed what it was in the housing crisis. It's not there. The lending standards are holding this. Most people qualify for and can afford their homes. The next slide that I have for you in there is just showing first half year of the year activity for each of those years. Again, you look at this and you look at just the first 6 months, same data source, and we're ahead of 2021. So if we look at the first half of 2022, we had 164,000. We look at the first half of 2021, and we were at 65,000. So now we could argue, play the devil's advocate, well, the trend is going the other way. Yes, that's right. The trend is going the other way. Interest rates have come up. People maybe got themselves over obligated on a price. They couldn't refinance it. They haven't sold it. They needed capital. They pulled too much cash out because it was easy to get the money out and the interest rates were low, but the payments still choking them. There are still situations that are going to cause foreclosures. There's still opportunities to be able to buy a foreclosure. It's just not a housing crisis. So as we look at that activity, I remind you that we are still in a seller's market. We still have less inventory than we need to have to even be in a neutralized market. We are normalizing. As we normalize, it's important that we have strategy and we have plans. We have to employ a plan to get to where we want to be. Last slide for you. Here's the 3 reasons, and this slide shows the 3 reasons that you should buy a home today. 3 main reasons to buy. There's currently fewer multiple offer scenarios and situations where you're having to overbid a home in order to get it. There are fewer homes that are selling above the asking price because we're seeing more inventory, even though it's still a seller's market and it's lower. And we're simply seeing that our supply of homes is growing, and so there are options to choose from or homes to compare against each other, and it's not that there's only 2 that fit and you have to pick one because it'll be sold in 15 minutes. When you're in that situation, you don't always buy the right thing. Now you have an opportunity. Now it's normalizing. Now's the time to buy a home. Find what helps you have certainty and not fear. I'm begging consumers to not react out of fear. You're going to have regrets if you react out of fear. Find people, talk to people. I don't care if you interview 50 agents, 50 accountants, 25 lenders. It doesn't matter what the number is. Talk to people and find the people that you resonate with, that you can build rapport with, that you feel like is giving you the points of information that you need to educatedly make a decision. But now is a great time to be buying. It's still also a great time to sell. Now is still a good market and there's still a lot of opportunity. Lean into what you want. Figure it out. Find it. Take the chance and have the opportunity to exceed your own expectations in what owning a home will do for you. I hope that you have a desire to own a home or to own another rental or to add your first rental or to continue to build and to grow. Have a great day.